This is Bone Chillers to disturb your dreams. Dare to join us? Click subscribe, ring the bell. But remember, we cannot guarantee your safety from the nightmares that await. Prepare to be thrilled, chilled, and filled with a sense of dread you'll find nowhere else. Welcome to the darkness. We've been waiting.
Spectral bonds. Ivy, with her infectious cheerfulness and contagious optimism, was not someone you'd associate with the dark and ominous. But an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative threw her into a world filled with precisely that. The grand, Victorian mansion was like a monumental shadow looming over the quaint town of Bitterwood, a place Ivy had never been to until she received the antique brass keys. The mansion was an intricate labyrinth of cold, stone hallways, ancient tapestries, and eerie whispers. Ivy was drawn to an old, rusty door that lay inconspicuously at the end of the longest corridor. With a deep breath and a determined spirit, she plunged the key into the lock, and the door creaked open, revealing an intimidating collection of arcane artifacts. The centerpiece was a ghastly, skeletal creature with multiple fangs, towering over the room. Ivy gasped as she read the golden plaque that simply read, Morrigan. As she stepped further into the room, the air chilled, and a spectral whisper echoed. "Welcome, Ivy." The sound sent shivers down Ivy's spine, but her natural resilience shone through. "Hello, Morrigan," she responded, attempting to mask her apprehension. Morrigan's presence was not as she'd imagined. The spectral whispers were eerie, but not malevolent. And there was an odd fondness in them, a longing perhaps, or a sense of relief. Ivy's visits to the room became frequent, and the entity seemed to anticipate them, the room growing colder with anticipation just before her arrival. But with Ivy's increasing bond with Morrigan, strange occurrences began to plague the mansion. Shadows darted across walls. Items disappeared and reappeared in unsettling places. The sounds of spectral sobs echoed down the cold, stone corridors. But the most terrifying was the transformation of Morrigan itself. Every time Ivy visited the room, the skeletal creature appeared less formidable, less monstrous. It seemed as though the entity was feeding off Ivy's positivity, morphing into something more human-like. One night, as Ivy walked down the mansion's darkened hallway, she saw a figure in a mirror. It was a woman, spectral and sad. The same skeletal figure, but now unmistakably female, with a tragic beauty that held Ivy's gaze. It was Morrigan, her eyes pleading. "Morrigan, what happened to you?" Ivy asked, her voice echoing in the cold, empty hallway. A whisper, deep and sorrowful, replied, "I was cursed, bound to my monstrous form until someone with pure spirit found me." Ivy, moved by the sorrow in Morrigan's voice, made a promise. "I will help you break this curse, Morrigan." For several days, Ivy studied the arcane artifacts, trying to find something that could help. Eventually, she discovered an ancient tome titled Spectral Bonds. It described a ritual to break the curse that imprisoned spirits like Morrigan. Ivy gathered the necessary items: an old dagger with a hilt encrusted with precious gems, a silver chalice filled with holy water, and a white candle made of beeswax. She traced the ritual circle on the wooden floor of the artifact room, and with each line drawn, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. "Are you ready, Morrigan?" Ivy asked, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yes, Ivy," Morrigan's whispers came. With a shaking hand, Ivy lit the candle, its pure light casting an otherworldly glow on Morrigan's spectral form. Ivy murmured the words written in the tome, her voice steady despite the fear knotting in her stomach. As she plunged the dagger into the chalice of holy water, a powerful force swept through the room, blowing out the candle. When the rush of wind subsided, Ivy relit the candle. As she did, she saw a woman standing before her, no longer spectral but solid and real. Morrigan, free from her skeletal form, was as beautiful as she was in the mirror, her eyes now sparkling with gratitude. Ivy had reconciled her sunny disposition with the darkness that lurked in her new home. She had faced terror and, with an unwavering spirit, dispelled it. As she looked into Morrigan's thankful eyes, Ivy realized the mansion was no longer a place of spectral bonds but of freedom and redemption. She knew then, she was exactly where she needed to be. Faceless in the forest, Allison and David, two adventurous spirits, had always looked forward to their annual camping trips. But this year, their destination was different, an obscure, uncharted patch of woodland deep in the heart of Montana. As they set up their camp under the mighty firs, a sense of foreboding descended upon them. "Strange," Allison muttered, scanning the dense woods around them. "It feels like we're being watched." David laughed it off. "It's just the forest playing tricks on you." As night fell, the eerie silence of the woods grew louder. Sitting around the fire, the flickering flames danced upon the dark canvas of the night, casting long and ominous shadows around their camp. Suddenly, the crunching of twigs pierced through the silence, making them jump. Out of the pitch-black forest, a figure emerged. It was a human, yet not quite. Naked, pale as a waning moon, and most terrifyingly, it had no face. Just a smooth expanse of skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. Frozen in fear, they watched as it hovered at the periphery of their campsite. Then, another figure appeared, identical to the first. Then another. Their campsite was surrounded by these horrifying apparitions, silent and faceless. Panicking, David threw a burning branch towards them. The figures didn't flinch. Instead, they moved closer, their blank faces gleaming eerily in the firelight. In a desperate scramble, the couple abandoned their camp, plunging into the dark heart of the woods. The faceless figures followed in eerie silence, a relentless, unending pursuit. They ran aimlessly, until Allison tripped over a tree root, twisting her ankle. David tried to help her up, but the faceless were closing in. They formed a circle around them, their bodies radiating an unnatural chill. Terrified and with nowhere to go, they waited for the end. Suddenly, a strange light pierced the gloom. David squinted, spotting an old, forgotten cabin nestled between the trees. With a surge of adrenaline, he hoisted Allison onto his back and bolted for the cabin, the faceless figures trailing close behind. They managed to barricade themselves inside the dilapidated cabin just as the faceless reached the door. The quiet was unbearable, the only sound was their harsh breathing and the soft thud of faceless bodies against the door. David peered through a crack in the wooden planks, watching as the figures slowly circled the cabin. As his gaze fell upon the faceless, he noticed a strange phenomenon. Every time the faceless moved into the light seeping from the cabin, they shrunk back, as if pained. "Light!" David exclaimed. "They can't stand light." With newfound hope, David rummaged through their backpacks, finding a torch and their old gas lamp. He lit them, illuminating the cabin with a warm glow. Outside, the faceless shuddered, their movements growing more frantic. They waited, breathless, until the first rays of dawn filtered through the cabin's broken windows. As sunlight spread across the forest, the faceless began to retreat, their bodies writhing, twisting, until one by one, they melted away into thin air. Gasping in relief, Allison and David stepped outside, the rising sun bathing the now serene forest in a soft golden light. The faceless figures were gone, leaving no trace of their terrifying existence. Exhausted but alive, they limped their way back to civilization, their chilling experience a stark reminder of the unseen terrors lurking in the unknown corners of the world. From that day forth, they hung up their camping gear for good, their thirst for adventure quenched by the faceless in the forest. Harlequin Hollow. A group of 4 friends, Sam, Lisa, Andy, and Maria, found themselves in the heart of the United States on a cross-country road trip. One late evening, lost amid cornfields and rolling hills, they stumbled upon a quaint and seemingly innocent town called Harlequin Hollow. Streetlights illuminated the cobblestone streets and charming antique buildings. Every person they saw was dressed as a clown. Sad clowns, happy clowns, even menacing clowns, a jumble of grotesque yet comical figures that sent chills down their spines. They must be preparing for some festival, Lisa mused, fascinated. Or they are just a bunch of loonies, Andy chimed, rolling his eyes. Regardless, they needed a place to rest for the night. They found their way to the town's inn, the Jester's Respite, greeted by a bellboy with a painted white face and an unsettling grin. Over a warm supper, the innkeeper, a hefty man with rainbow-colored hair and a tiny hat, shared stories about the town's history. In Harlequin Hollow, we don the visage of the clown to honor our ancestors, he explained. We believe in the dual nature of existence, joy and sorrow, laughter and tears, life and death. As the night grew, the innkeeper excused himself to prepare for the evening's main event, a spectacle that would take place in the town square at the stroke of midnight. He extended an invitation, and despite the oddity of the situation, the friends decided to attend. There, under the haunting glow of the moon, the townspeople gathered, each wearing grotesque clown costumes, their faces lost in shadows. The town clock chimed midnight, and a hush fell over the crowd. A clown, more ghastly than the rest, came forth, leading a spectral white horse. It was the Pied Piper of this grotesque orchestra. He started to laugh, a sound that echoed around the square and made the horse dance in rhythm. The crowd joined in, a cacophony of deranged laughter filling the night. Suddenly, the clowns started to change. Their bodies contorted, their laughter deepened, twisted. The painted smiles began to peel away, revealing grimacing, monstrous faces underneath. The spectacle was not a performance but a transformation. Terrified, the friends tried to run but found their bodies frozen in place. All they could do was watch as the monstrous clowns approached them, their laughter now a guttural growl. The lead clown raised a gnarled finger and pointed directly at them. "You have been chosen," he proclaimed, voice like the grave's cold wind. Suddenly, the spectral horse reared and charged at them. The friends closed their eyes, awaiting the end, but instead of feeling the impact, they felt a strange sensation, like shedding a layer of themselves. When they opened their eyes, they saw their reflections in a nearby mirror, adorned in exaggerated makeup and flamboyant costumes. Horrified, they realized they had been transformed into the town's grotesque clowns. Their laughs became deeper, more sinister, echoing into the night. They watched their humanity drift away, replaced by the primal duality of Harlequin Hollow's existence. In the mirror, they saw the lead clown behind them. His monstrous face split into a wide grin as he whispered, "Welcome to the Forever Carnival." As dawn approached, the monstrous clowns faded into the morning mist, leaving behind only the innocuous townsfolk with their painted faces and cheerful demeanor. The friends, now part of this grim masquerade, found themselves smiling with genuine joy as they greeted the new day, their fears and the horrors of the night swallowed by their new identities. Away from Harlequin Hollow, a signboard flickered under a lone streetlight. Population, 416. With a buzzing flicker, the numbers rolled up. Population, 420. The road stretched beyond the horizon, inviting new visitors to the Forever Carnival of Harlequin Hollow. The Artemis III. Commander Thomas Rickshaw had dreamt of leaving his footprint on the lunar dust since childhood. His dreams had come true when he was chosen to command the Artemis III mission to the moon. But nothing had prepared him for the twisted nightmare that the reality would become. The landing was supposed to be routine, a carefully planned descent. But something went wrong. A loud, dissonant roar echoed through the cabin as alarms flashed and warning buzzers sounded. Rickshaw's crewmates, Green and Martinez, screamed as the capsule spiraled out of control, crashing hard onto the moon's desolate surface. Rickshaw woke up in the dim light of the damaged module, head throbbing and vision blurred. His heart pounded as he found Green and Martinez lifeless in their seats. The radio, meant to connect him with the safe haven back on Earth, crackled with static and eerie silence. He was alone, his astronaut training kicked in. Rickshaw decided to exit the lunar module, to at least set up a beacon for rescue, clutching his heart at the sight of Earth suspended in the vast, black void. But as he lowered the ramp and took his first step onto the moon's grey surface, he froze. A multitude of luminescent creatures crawled, slithered, and hovered just beyond the ramp. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, half serpent, half insect, their bodies shimmering under the moon's dull glow. His instincts screamed at him to retreat, but fascination overpowered fear. He ventured out into the open, the creatures moving away from him, their bioluminescent bodies illuminating the lunar dust. He reached the beacon equipment, focusing on each movement, but a deep, uncanny sense of being watched grew with every passing second. Suddenly, a searing pain shot through his leg. Looking down, he saw one of the creatures latched onto him, its body pulsing as it burrowed into his spacesuit. Rickshaw screamed, kicking the creature off, only to see more racing towards him. He ran back to the module, adrenaline overpowering his fear. Inside, he inspected the damage, his breath hitching as he saw a small hole in his suit. He stripped down, fear gripping him as he saw a black, vein-like pattern creeping up his leg. Desperate, he tried the radio again, praying for a response. The reply was not from Earth. It was a cacophonous, metallic sound that echoed through the radio, sending chills down his spine. Then, silence. He looked out the small window and gasped. Hundreds of the luminescent creatures hovered outside the module, their bodies pulsating in a strange rhythm, mirroring the pattern spreading across his leg. His vision began to blur as the pain intensified. He stumbled back, hitting the wall of the module and sinking to the floor. He could barely move, his body freezing as the pattern spread, encasing him in a black, pulsating cocoon. Hours, or maybe minutes passed. Time was a fluid concept on the moon. Rickshaw felt his consciousness ebb, the radio crackling back to life. It was ground control, their panicked voices asking for a status update, their words a cruel irony to his plight. His vision cleared for a moment, long enough for him to see the creatures beginning to glow brightly, their bodies resonating with the pattern on his. He could feel them in his mind, their thoughts seeping into his, revealing their ancient existence and insatiable hunger. A final, chilling realization came to him: the moon was their world, and he was their feast. As his eyes fluttered shut, he saw the creatures surge forward, their forms merging with his. His last thoughts were of Earth, shimmering blue and green in the distance, his dreams now a distant memory. And so, Commander Thomas Rickshaw became the first and last human to truly know the moon's dark secret, swallowed by the serpentine luminescence of its unearthly inhabitants, his final screams echoing into the radio, forever lost in the vast expanse of space. The Blood Moon's Hood. In a world where fairy tales twist into nightmares, there existed a quaint little village, edging the murky depths of the sinister Darkwood Forest. In the heart of the village lived a young maiden known as Little Red Riding Hood, but unbeknownst to the villagers, she bore a dark secret. Her scarlet cloak was not only her namesake but a symbol of the blood she had tasted, for she was a vampire. One gloomy evening, her elderly grandmother fell ill. Worried, Red decided to visit her, bearing a basket full of medicinal herbs and remedies. The only path to grandmother's remote cottage was through the ominous Darkwood Forest, but Red was no ordinary girl to be frightened of such tales. As Red set foot on the dirt path, the crimson canopy of the forest seemed to welcome her. The moon, hanging like a ghostly galleon in the ebony sky, cast an eerie light through the gnarled branches. This environment that instilled fear in mortal hearts was home to Red. Her eyes, gleaming an unnatural ruby, adjusted to the darkness. The vampire maiden was not the prey here but the predator. Venturing deeper, she felt a strange sensation, a presence she had never felt before. Suddenly, a howl shattered the silence, echoing throughout the Darkwood Forest. A normal girl would flee, but Red was intrigued. Her eyes flickered towards the direction of the sound. A large wolf, the alpha of his pack, stood under the pallid moonlight, his eyes glowing a menacing green. He was the only known creature capable of challenging a vampire's dominance. "Little girl, why are you out in such a terrifying place?" the wolf growled, a mix of curiosity and threat in his voice. Red smirked, her fangs glinting ominously under the lunar light. "Isn't it you who should be scared, wolf?" she retorted. The wolf, taken aback by her courage, growled menacingly but didn't attack. "Where do you journey at this dark hour?" the wolf questioned, his interest piqued. "To my ailing grandmother's home," Red replied nonchalantly. An idea sprouted in the wolf's cunning mind. If he couldn't overcome the vampire, he could reach the weak grandmother before her. Slipping away under the guise of fear, the wolf took a hidden shortcut to grandmother's home, leaving Red alone in the forest. Upon reaching the cottage, the wolf easily overpowered the sickly old woman, imprisoning her in a nearby cellar. He then disguised himself in her clothes and waited for Red's arrival. Meanwhile, the sinister atmosphere of the forest became a lullaby for Red, who was walking at her own leisurely pace, convinced of her superiority. As she approached the cottage, she noticed the door ajar. An unsettling feeling crept into her. Her grandmother, weak as she was, would never leave the door open. She entered cautiously. In her grandmother's bed lay the wolf, ridiculously dressed in her grandmother's clothes. He had underestimated Red's senses, a fatal mistake. The moment Red laid eyes on him, she knew. "Granny, what big eyes you have," she said, playing along, inching closer to the bed. "All the better to see you with, my dear," the wolf responded, struggling to maintain his disguise. "And Granny, what big teeth you have," she remarked, a devilish smile playing on her lips. "All the better to eat you with, my dear." With that, the wolf leapt forward, his disguise falling apart. But he had underestimated Red. Quick as a flash, she sidestepped his attack. With strength belying her slender frame, she hurled him across the room. The wolf, momentarily stunned, didn't see her advance. With a swift motion, she sunk her fangs into his neck. A dreadful howl escaped him, echoing through the silence of the night. Once the wolf lay defeated, Red rescued her grandmother from the cellar. She found her unconscious but alive. Deciding to reveal her truth, she bit her wrist and let a few drops of her potent vampire blood fall into her grandmother's mouth. It wasn't long before the color returned to her cheeks, her frail body rejuvenating. In the aftermath of the gruesome night, Little Red Riding Hood was no longer just a young maiden to her grandmother but a savior. The tale of her encounter spread across the village, the details contorted and watered down until it became a bedtime story for children. And so, the Darkwood Forest became more dreaded, the village more insular, and Red, the vampire in a crimson hood, continued to exist in her secret, bloodbound world.
Thank you for watching, and remember, the darkness awaits. Until our paths cross again, stay fearful and stay subscribed.